My father is an obsessive gambler, and the loan shark boss threatened to chop off his hands if he didn't repay the money. In a desperate frenzy, he went everywhere borrowing money. 3 days later, he mysteriously brought us a plate of fragrant and appetizing meat. From that day on, his gambling luck turned, and he became a renowned gambling king. However, my younger siblings started to exhibit green glows in their eyes every night, and shortly afterward, they both went missing. Little Pan, you know, Dad has always had great potential. It's just that luck has been on his side, right? This was the first time my dad spoke to me in a soft voice after my mom left. He was holding a plate of fragrant meat, and the aroma was like a hook, making me and my 2 siblings salivate. Eat, you and your sister share it, remember. Don't give any to your brother. After saying this, my dad, somewhat intoxicated, hummed a little tune and returned to his room, occasionally laughing with anticipation. I didn't understand. My brother was born after my parents struggled to have a child, and usually, my dad, who gave good things to my brother, why didn't he let him eat meat? My brother didn't understand either, so he vigorously hit me on the head, demanding, "Pay up, give me some meat, give me some meat." Afraid of making my brother angry, I gave the entire plate of meat to him, and secretly took a few pieces to my sister hiding in the corner. My brother devoured the meat, becoming faster and more ferocious. Even though his belly was bulging, he kept eating as if he was starving, occasionally exclaiming, "So delicious, so delicious." I stood by, constantly swallowing saliva, but I dared not take a step forward. At night, a light rain started, and I was awakened by rooster crowing. When I went outside, I saw my 2 siblings staring at the chickens in the coop with longing eyes. Afraid they would wake up, my dad, and get beaten, I quickly pulled them back to the house, but their heads turned mechanically, and they stared at me, with glowing green eyes. I shivered and was nailed to the spot. "Little brother, little sister," I tentatively called out, and reached for their hands. The plum tree in the yard swayed in the wind, and the fallen flowers turned crimson. Where they landed, I held the 2 and went back inside. Suddenly, the chickens in the yard fell silent. In the pitch black night, only the sound of raindrops hitting the ground remained. I turned around and saw my brother and sister with lowered heads, walking unsteadily, not like humans but more like some kind of creature. The next day before dawn, my dad, who had sobered up, opened the door excitedly and asked me, "Is the meat all gone?" I nodded fearfully. He happily went out, and for many days, he didn't come back. The next news I heard was, when I was washing clothes by the river. Did you hear? Old Zhao won a lot of money on the gambling table, and paid off all his high-interest loans. Oh, really evil. I heard even the cheaters couldn't beat him. Yes, my dad won big money. He started drinking and having fun with a group of brothers at home, listening proudly to their praises. Occasionally, in the quiet of the night, I could see my dad kneeling in front of the table, muttering to himself. On the table were fruits and burning incense, and a red cloth hanging on the wall with the words, "Guardian Spirit, Huang Bakai." Who was Huang Bakai? Why did my dad offer sacrifices to him? I dared not ask too much, just shivering as I saw my dad's increasingly distorted expression through the crack in the door. A few days after my dad got rich, my siblings went missing. The police came, but they could only speculate from the scene that they had left on their own. Neighbors guessed they were taken by human traffickers, but I knew the truth was different. On the night they disappeared, I heard someone wailing outside the door. It sounded like a mix of male and female voices, scaring me into silence. After a while, a soft female voice came again. It was our long-lost mom. I peeked through the crack in the blanket and saw my brother and sister hop out the door on tiptoes. I wanted to quietly call them back, but suddenly, I saw a bloodied face on the window. The face had 2 eyeballs hanging precariously, rolling towards me like animal claws. I was scared stiff, huddled in the blanket without making a sound. My brother and sister disappeared, and no one could find them, not even their bodies. After my brother disappeared, my dad went mad. He slapped me hard and accused, "Why wasn't it you? Why didn't you eat the meat?" He pulled my hair and locked me in the woods. The shed never saw sunlight, and it was colder than anything, but it still couldn't match the coldness in my heart. Why did my dad ask if I had eaten the meat? Why did my brother and sister, who ate the meat, behave strangely and then disappear? What was that meat, after all? I dared not think too much. Even though my siblings went missing, it didn't stop my dad from going to the gambling table. On the contrary, he became even more frequent. I secretly hid a piece of wire and, every day, sneaked into the shed to get some food and drink. One night, as usual, I was about to leave the shed when a gloomy wind blew through the yard. Dark clouds covered the moon, and I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Even though it was midsummer, An unexplainable chill raised goosebumps on my skin. The voices in the house suddenly stopped, and I heard a patter of raindrops. Then, the next door room echoed with a heartbreaking cry, and soon, it fell silent. Everything returned to quiet. Patter, patter. The sound started again, and this time, it seemed much lighter than before. In the pitch-black room, the visual absence heightened my hearing. Suddenly, patter stopped, and I felt something watching me outside the door. Thump, thump. My heart pounded wildly. After a while, the patter started again, moving away. I relaxed, collapsed on the door, and saw a few clusters of yellow fur, blown into a disarray on the ground. Someone in our house died, one of my dad's gambling buddies. His death was gruesome. Someone forcibly peeled off his skin. The skin was torn into shreds not far from the body, as if by the claws of an animal. The police who came to investigate even vomited several times. My dad was taken away by them, and since I was locked in the shed, I was cleared of any criminal suspicion. Relatives from my mom's side had long lost contact. My grandmother despised me, and for a moment, I had nowhere to go, so I continued to hide in the shed. I secretly hid a pair of scissors under the firewood, hoping to never have to use it. Even so, whenever I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the patter sound, that day, and the bloody corpse. A few days later, my dad was released, accompanied by my grandmother. She slapped me as soon as she saw me. Compensation. Why wasn't it you who died? I stood numbly on the side without saying a word. My dad impatiently interrupted her. Mom, don't bother with her for now. First, tell me why that thing came. It wanted children, and didn't I give it one? Grandma sneered a few times. Idiot, that yellow-skinned thing died 2 female cubs, and you gave it a male cub. Would it be happy? In their conversation, they didn't even try to avoid me. My dad looked at me, with suddenly fierce eyes. Bitch, just like your mom. A flirt. Are you deliberately harming your brother? I could only respond softly, I didn't, but my dad didn't care. He let go of my collar, and knelt on the ground, begging my grandmother, Mom, you only have me as a son, you must save me. If it's not satisfied, it'll take my life. I was afraid they would notice me, so I silently prayed they wouldn't. My grandmother, with a sinister look, glanced around and took a piece of stinking skin from my dad, then cruelly pinched my hand, and used a small knife to pierce it. I felt a sudden pain in my hand, watching my blood drip onto the yellow skin. No, I didn't know what my grandmother was going to do, but I instinctively felt scared. My grandmother smiled satisfactorily. Little girl, it's your luck to save your dad. Saying that, she grabbed my arm, and locked me in the room where my dad usually stayed. My dad took a blanket and went into the shed. By evening, he called a few friends to accompany him for courage. The bloodstains in the room were not cleaned up, and the breath in the air still carried a scent of rust. I sat shivering in the corner, with a bloodied piece of yellow fur at my side. Soon, the sun set, and I watched the last ray of sunlight outside the window disappear. Without eating all day, I lay on the heated bed, my stomach convulsing uncontrollably. I stuffed the yellow fur into the farthest corner from me, but could still smell a faint stench. The plum tree in the yard bore fruit out of season, unusually large and purplish red. I didn't know if I would have the chance to taste the sweet and sour plums after tonight. Suddenly, the noisy commotion from the woods stopped. I was weak from hunger, and my entire body trembled. I put the yellow fur in the corner, yet I could still smell a faint stench. The chickens in the yard suddenly fell silent. Patter, patter. The familiar sound started again, but this time, it seemed much lighter than before. In the pitch-black room, the absence of sight heightened my hearing. I was suddenly alert. My sleepiness dissipated. Patter, patter. The sound approached closer and closer. Thud, thud. A knocking sound abruptly echoed. I dared not make any movement with my back to the door. The door trembled violently, and I kept shivering my shoulders, accompanied by a rustling sound. The door was pushed open. Patter, patter. The soft footsteps came closer and closer. To me, Daddy. The creature behind me spoke, emitting a young girl's voice. It was my sister. Was she still alive? I still dared not move. Tightly closing my eyes, my sister behind me kept calling, Daddy, Daddy, eat meat. The cries became more and more mournful, gradually turning into wails. She was getting closer. I could feel the chilling wind, as if something free brushed against my face. It's sister. The girl giggled. Sister, play with me.